today I'm going to be talking about sewing with the treadle machine and about the clothing in general. And our time period is between 1850 and 1930. Now prior to 1850, let's say in the 18th century, clothing was much more difficult to acquire. The settlers came over with their clothing that they had brought, and they wore that for quite a while before they were able to make some of their own. So they would be wearing their clothes for working and for going to church on Sunday. When they started making their own fabric, whether it was in the United States or in Canada, there were only three choices. They could have wool made from the wool that they took off the sheep after it had been cleaned, and the wool would have been spun with a spinning wheel. This one that we have in the room here is a very large one. They would have a smaller version of a spinning wheel in the home, and after the wool had been spun, then it would be knitted, and they would be making socks and hats and toques and whatever, sweaters, vests with the knitting. The knitting was done by the women in the evening, and with the daughters as well, and even some of the boys were knitting at home. Some of the younger boys, they had learned how to knit. The second choice was linen, and linen was acquired from flax fiber. If they had planted flax seed, they would end up with flax fiber. Now that was done more in the States than in Canada, but I believe some of the Canadians did it as well. They needed about 3/4 of an acre of land to grow flax. The flax would be spun into thread, and again the thread was woven and it became linen, and they would make their day dresses out of that and the shirts for the men. The other choice for material was leather, and leather was acquired from either the cows or the deer or the sheep, and it was tanned, and from that they would make their boots and belts. And if you were a blacksmith, you would need a leather apron. So that's how they acquired their fabric. And then by around 1840, there were enough general stores that were bringing in fabric from Europe, and they could order their fabric from these stores. Or if they were in a rural or remote setting, they would be able to order from the next town, from the merchant in the next town. They would have to wait a while, and especially if they had enough money to order fabric from Europe, they would definitely be waiting a while. So the clothing was made at home, and it was made by hand, sewn by hand. Now by 1830, the sewing machine was invented in France. By 1845, Isaac Merritt Singer had a patent on it, and he won an award in Paris, in the Paris Fair in 1855. Now these were threadle sewing machines. They didn't appear in Canada. I believe the first one appeared around 1860. And most homes would not have had a threadle sewing machine till around 1890. So again, they were sewing their clothing by hand. A threadle machine is a machine with a pedal, and you have to be concerned with the strap that it doesn't break. We have acquired these sewing machines in the village, and they're usually broken. So about 15 years ago, I did manage to find a belt. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to use this machine. The other complication now for us is to find the needles, which are very different than today's modern machines. They're longer and they're very difficult to find. I did have a broken one yesterday, and I wondered how to replace it. I did find some in my mother's things, and my mother's things come from around 1930, so she had some in her supplies. I had a small box of souvenirs from her sewing days. So that is how a threadle machine works. You have to be concerned with the belt and the needle. It's a very simple machine. It only goes forward. You cannot sew backwards like we do with modern machines. And there is a limitation to the size of your stitch. I really could not find much of an adjustment on this one, so it will be sewing just one straight chain stitch, and that will be all that we could do with it. A few years ago, I did discover how to find bobbins for it. I had to actually, at the time, go to Oshawa, where there's a Singer store, and we did find some bobbins for these machines. And I had somebody in the village fix the bobbin winder so that it would work. So actually the machines were lovely to have in their home. They're very decorative and they're very useful. They have nice drawers to hold your thread and all kinds of wonderful things that you need for sewing, like scissors. What I like especially about it is this little compartment that holds the bobbins. And the bobbins are different than today's bobbins. They're very long and skinny, and they have a completely different shuttle than modern day sewing machines. The shuttle is like this. Looks like a bullet for a gun, but it's a sewing machine shuttle. Now I will be sitting down and I will see that I can actually sew with this machine. I will now demonstrate sewing with this threadle machine. Find a nice piece of cotton. Cotton was not something that they could make in Canada or the States. They would, the States grew cotton, but they had to send it to England for it to be made there, and then the cotton was sent by ship back to Canada. Now, for this machine to work, we have to control this wheel, because if it goes backwards, the machine doesn't like it. It's not good for any machine. So you have to get your feet going in the right way. And if you break your pedaling, the wheel will go backwards and break your thread and also not be very happy. As I said, all you can do with this machine is go straight. Now, I grew up using a threadle machine until I was around 22. I made a lot of dresses, even wedding dresses, with a threadle machine. So we had one at home and I liked it. I didn't need any of the fancy stitches then that we have on modern day machines. So that is how the machine works. I showed you what the bobbin looked like, and I'm using this to pry this plate open because it's very stiff. You can see that the shuttle is in there, this shuttle, and the bobbin's inside there, and you insert your bobbin in a certain way so that the thread comes out through there into this little clip, and it engages with the top thread. Now, this machine also now can make a bobbin. I wondered about that when I wanted to use this machine to demonstrate with, because if you can't make a bobbin, then you're pretty well stuck. So the bobbin is put in here. Brought up through here into this clip, and then we hope for the best. I'm supposed to disengage that when I make a bobbin so that this doesn't move. So this is how you make a bobbin. I'm holding on to it just to give extra tension. And then you tighten this wheel again, and now that engages the sewing machine needle back. So that's all I can do with the sewing machine.